All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashum Yahushai, Bahashum Rakakodash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rakoya from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And I want to get into this video, very briefly through the spirit before I lay it down. I caught this video from Redacted News, and it's entitled Professor Pape, The Collapse is Now Ahead of Schedule. All right, which is actually a perfect title for tonight's lesson. All right, the collapse is now ahead of schedule, or rather the collapse is right on schedule, because the Lord has been speeding up the days as well as the prophecies, and since the beginning of this year, Babylon has been on a downward spiral. It's been making terrible decisions, blowing resources and losing allies by the day. By the day, Babylon has been blowing it, and it's all according to prophecy. And the Lord is speeding up the times, and just as sure as we can see it, these different economic forecasters can see it as well. And just like this channel and many others that brothers frequent, for news and articles, one common consensus amongst these economic forecasters is the fact that economically this war doesn't make any sense. This war that is taking place with Iran and China currently, really doesn't make any sense for Babylon economically, because it's not creating any jobs, because AI is taking over. And economically, the economy is getting worse, and the average American is falling under. And that's one common consensus amongst these economic forecasters. Their eyes have all been darkened, and that's prophecy. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened." All right, and this guy, Professor Pape, and many other like him, all right, will be considered to be those who look out of the windows, which is getting into the keeper. He would be considered a keeper of the house, because he's looking to keep the Babylon afloat, which you're going to hear in the video, here in a second. But he, amongst many, are amongst the keepers of the house whose eyes are now being darkened. The windows are now being darkened, because they don't see a prosperous future for Babylon, if it continues to take this course of action, which it will, because according to prophecy, Babylon is going to be drawn into this third world's war, all right, by Israel, and the least of the flock, all right, which they're going to be drawn into that valley of Hamagat one, all right, Yahweh Shaphat, over there by the Persian Gulf, all right, which Iran, China, Russia, all right, will utterly decimate their forces. And and whilst decimating their forces, ICBM nuclear missiles will be shot off as a result from China, Russia, Iran, and its conglomerates, alongside Babylon. Babylon is going to shoot missiles as well. But the only place that was prophesied to be utterly destroyed, where there will be a line of confusion, is Babylon. All right, which is Isaiah 34, and we just get the point. This is Isaiah 34 and 11. But the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it, the owl also and the raven shall dwell in it, and he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. All right, and the line of confusion is going to be drawn in Babylon the Great, because once those missiles are dropped, you really won't be able to tell what state is which, what land is which and what landmark is which, because this land is going to be leveled. It's going to be leveled to the point to where only, unclean birds, and animals inhabit this place. Excuse me. But let me see. I wanted to get that Ecclesiastes 12 in the NLT 12:3. Remember him before your legs, the guards of your house start to tremble, and before your shoulders the strong men stoop. Before him, before your teeth, your few remaining servants stop grinding, and before your eyes the women looking through windows see dimly. All right. And now, it says the same thing in NIV. But now the keepers of the house are starting to tremble, because they don't see a prosperous future for America. All right. And the grinding is ceasing as well, because the jobs are simultaneously being taken away by AI. It almost seems as if this is a strategic collapse of the economy. And this is the consensus that these economic forecasters are coming to. A lot of them often say, so like it seems like this is a strategic collapse of the society, which it is. It is, because the elites plan on issuing in this technocracy, in this digital age, where they'll be able to control every aspect of buying and selling and life itself. And in order to do that, they have to collapse this current system to implement the new. All right. And right now we're just in the process of this old system being collapsed. All right. To usher in the new. But I want to play a couple of minutes of this video.
Well, are we heading into a global disaster? Well, it appears that way. A few days ago, Professor Robert Pape posted this on X with an ominous warning. Within 10 days, parts of the global economy will start running short of critical goods. After 30 years studying economic sanctions and blockades, I don't say this lightly, not just higher prices, shortages. Markets are not ready for this. He posted that on April 12th, so in 2 days, we'll have hit the professor's 10-day deadline and escalation trap. By the way, that's the name of his Substack, by the way. And just about 2 hours ago, the Kobalisi letter published this on the economy. It's official. The world is now experiencing its biggest energy crisis in history, with 600 million barrels of lost oil supply. U.S. gas prices are up 47% since December. They were already going up before this war. And inflation is nearing 4% in a similar path to the 1970s. What happens next? Let us explain. And you can read there. They do a great job over there as well. Meanwhile, the Iran war may be heading right back into open war. Over the weekend, the United States seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship. Friend of the show, Larry Johnson, said this was piracy. This was an act of war, trying to clear the Strait of Hormuz, saying it was trying to break the American blockade. Tehran called the move armed piracy and vowed a response to this. Meanwhile, a U.S. team led by J.D. Vance was heading to Islamabad, Pakistan for a new round of talks, even though the Iranian side say they haven't even agreed to anything. So J.D. Vance essentially might be going into an empty room. Just going to sort of sitting there. Maybe they'll have some tea and coffee and he can just sort of sit there and no Iranians show up to talk to him.
Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that this video was done 3 months ago. So we're really seeing all of this we've already seen a lot of this play out,
Fox's Tel Aviv reporter says Trump called him, talked to him on the phone, and told him they're going to blow up everything in Iran if they don't come to the table. Watch.
I just spoke with President Trump for about 20 minutes, and he told me if Iran does not sign this deal, the whole country is getting blown up. He went on to say that bridges and power plants will be targeted if Iran does not sign this agreement. The president is getting blown up. He went on to say that bridges and power plants will be targeted if Iran does not sign this agreement. The president.
And right now, we're currently coming off of four U.S. soldiers who just got decimated, all right, by the Iranian forces because of the constant onslaught of bombs that America has been dropping on Iran for the past 8 or 9 days. All right, so we see how these peace treaties ultimately, they fell through. Iran isn't backing down from their position because now they're backed by the Guard, all right, which is Russia, all right, as well as China. Now they have backing, so they're no longer, subsiding to America, Babylon the Great. All right, now they're taking a stance. And, as it is, they've essentially won the war that has been waged against them by the U.S., which is a major victory, for the Iranian forces, and for the world. It really shows that Babylon is no longer the top dog.
Tell me that U.S. Special Envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are heading to Islamabad, Pakistan for meetings on Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday, to try and get this agreement across the finish line. The president telling Fox News this is a very simple deal, but this is the last chance for the Iranians. The president very clear in our conversation that he is not making the same mistake that President Obama made, giving cash to the Iranians and allowing them to continue a nuclear program. The deal on the table is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that the Iranians do not have this highly enriched uranium that is buried deep underground after Operation Midnight Hammer last summer. And again, the president telling Fox News that the entire country will be blown up. Bridges and power plants will be targeted if the Iranians do not sign this agreement.
So Fox News sure loves that. Absolutely. Professor Robert Pape is the director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats at the University of Chicago and the author of Escalation Trap on Substack. Professor, great to have you here on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's really quite a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's our honor, and I wanted to kind of wind the clock back to something you posted a few days ago on April 12th about where we are heading. Within 10 days, parts of the global economy will start running short of critical goods. After 30 years, as you've been studying economic sanctions and blockades, you don't say this lightly. Well, we're about 2 days away now from your sort of prediction. Anything you want to change in your prediction or maybe accelerate it?
We're ahead. Yeah, we're ahead of schedule. So just 4 or 5 days after I made that prediction, and by the way, there's a much longer paper on the Substack that really goes into it. Of course, you can't do that in a tweet. That jet fuel. We're running about a month. It's about a month before we're going to be out of jet fuel in Europe. And you're already seeing that airliners are already cutting back. So Air Canada is cutting back their flights to LaGuardia for a month at this point, maybe longer. It's not clear when they'll restart them. I spend a lot of my time now on different media with Australia. 80% of their oil comes in here into this essentially an island continent. And they're really already strapped and in crisis. And I also spend a lot of time with India because they are already experiencing dramatic shortages as well. So what you are seeing here play itself out. And now for your audience, I think it's important to understand there's 3 stages I'm explaining. It's not just a crystal ball, throw the dart prediction. There's 3 stages. Stage 1 is for the first 45 or so days. You have, when you have a cutoff, you have prices go up. And then you get into the 45 to 60 day range, and that's that 10-day period you're talking about, where you actually start to have the shortages occur. And that's what you're seeing emerging now. And then as you go from day 60 to day 90, the shortages get worse and worse. It's not like shortages stop, and prices keep getting worse and worse. But then you have contraction kick in. And that's really what will start to kick in by May 31st here. So what you're seeing is already the the predictions I'm making in terms of the shortages are coming sooner than I was anticipating, not later. And you're already starting to see the glimmers of the contraction. And what you just described with the possible escalation coming, this could actually, I guess, even further double confirm the expectations I had.
What does that mean, contraction, for us consumers?
It means we're going to stop producing commodities. We're going to stop having actual goods and actual seats on aircraft. So let me just pick air traffic, because a lot of people we hear travel in the air. So in Europe, there are about 110 million passengers on aircraft every single month. So if you don't have jet fuel, if you literally zero it out, the first step is you'll scramble. How can I get some more of it from somewhere? So you'll go to Nigeria, that's a place, and you'll actually come to the United States. But that is actually occurring, well, everybody else is running out of jet fuel too. Europe's not going to be the only one. And so you'll get about 50%, maybe if you're lucky, back. So that means suddenly, after about 4 weeks, the contraction piece of this is that you'll go from 110 to something like 80, and then 70, and then 60 million passengers. And then that's just the passengers. You see, there's all the cargo, all the mail, all the just-in-time deliveries that happen through the air that we've gotten so used to. That's going to contract as well. And then the time deliveries that happen through the air that we've gotten so used to, that's going to contract as well. And then
and we've seen flight lines like Spirit fully contract to where there is zero bodies in those seats. That flight line has completely collapsed due to this shortage. And there are many others that are on the verge of collapse as well, like JetBlue. JetBlue, I know, is one of them. I want to say American Express, but I'm not too sure on American Express. But I know for sure JetBlue. And Spirit. We've seen
actual products, not just the delivery system. The actual products will start to contract as well. So that we experienced some of this contraction during COVID, but this is now in some ways even more disastrous, because the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the world's oil, there's just not a spare 20% laying around to pick up. And you now have both Iran shutting that down and effectively the United States shutting it down. So you got to persuade two countries to let that oil open up, not just one anymore.
Is this really about China?
I don't think so. It's a beat. Their whole ever since Trump's backup is nuclear and coal, and then if they have to, they'll go to the stockpiles of oil. And they were explaining this to me and showing me their plan.
East Asia and China?
Yeah, so what I discovered when I went to China, which I've done many times, but since COVID, very few Americans, including American business people, have actually been to China. Almost no politicians have actually gone to China. So they don't know that, for example, for the last 5, starting in COVID, China has been stockpiling its oil. It hasn't just worried about this crisis right now and then starting to scramble. For years, it's built up a giant stockpile of oil. Its whole energy in its whole entire economy, it's 80% driven without oil at all. So it's not like all of its economy hinges on its oil. What's been happening is they've been, because they don't produce oil, they've gone into solar in a big way. Their backup is nuclear and coal. And then if they have to, they'll go to the stockpiles of oil. And they were explaining this to me and showing me their plans, the actual business models at these giant companies in China that are just taken off. And this is
in China, Moab is really always taking the blueprint from Esau, Edom, and tried to advance it, forward it. That's why in 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, it says, woe to thou Asia, the partaker of Babylon. Let me get it, matter of fact. China is always, Moab especially, has always taken the blueprint of Esau, Edom, and tried to forward it, to advance it. All right, this is 2nd Ezra 15, verse 46. It says, and thou, Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon, and art the glory of her person, woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom, that it might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. All right. So ultimately, at the end of the day, even though China is making better moves, business moves, than Babylon, ultimately they're going to be destroyed as well. The Lord is going to take them down as well. They don't, just because they have a head up now doesn't mean that they're going to be the next world power. Nobody concerning this present hegemony, this present struggle for rulership is going to receive that top spot. Not Russia, not China, not Iran, not India, all right, not Babylon, not America. All right, none of these current world powers are going to claim that number one seat after this next world war. All right, the one to claim that number one seat is going to be Yahushua, all right, because he's coming to subjugate, all right, all the nations, all right, when he comes in his great glory, all right, his absolute power, okay? The Lord is coming to subjugate these nations and put them under his foot and claim the number one spot, rightfully so, to claim his throne.
Is also, by the way, why the tariffs just are not, they don't miss a beat. Their whole, ever since Trump slapped tariffs on China way back in 2017, China got the memo. And so they've been building almost 10 years to be independent of America wrecking their economy. China got the memo. And so they've been building almost 10 years to be independent of America wrecking their economy.
What does that sound like? This is Obadiah. Verse 7. I'm starting verse 6. How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in them. All right, and this prophecy is in full effect. All right, this precept is in full effect right now. All right, they that were at peace with Babylon at one point in time. All right, because like it says in Revelation, they all agreed to give their a piece of their kingdom over to the beast, roughly paraphrasing. All right, because the Lord gave that power to America, to subjugate the nations. All right, but even though they gave a piece of their kingdom over for a period in time, they weren't slacking. All right, they were laying wounds and traps, underneath Babylon to one day overtake it. And through the pride of the so-called white man, the pride of the devil, he couldn't see the snares and traps being laid for him, right underneath his nose. Here it is, the so-called white man thinks that he can bomb a country for years, for decades, and expect that country not to amount to anything. He expects that country to constantly, bow down to their military force. He didn't think that eventually, the bully or the bullied learn how to bully themselves. And that's exactly what's happening in the planet Earth. The bullied have learned how to bully. They've learned the tactics of bullying.
Can I follow up on that? Do you mind?
Please.
So, something the president has said to us many times since starting this war is we don't need to collaborate with other countries. We have our own oil. We're all good. We don't actually have a stockpile that's comparable to China, as far as I can tell. We have some, but not like what you're explaining. And how energy independent is the United States? If you were to give us a grade. a letter grade.
No, we are energy independent. I'm one of the people pushing for that going back to 2005 with Dick Lugar in the Senate. So my work on suicide terrorism said being too wedded to the Middle East was a bad idea. Let's become energy independent. That's in Dying to Win, my 2005 book, and I worked with Senator Lugar in the Senate on these issues. I'm a very big believer in that. But that is missing. That's looking at a small part of the picture. And I think what I want is I want America to be the richest, most powerful country on the planet. I just want to be super crystal clear. And the problem that we face right now is, I believe, and I'm not saying that President Trump is intending this, but I believe that a lot of his policies are working the opposite to that goal of America as number one, as the most powerful. And I am deeply concerned, not because of some liberal thing at all. I'm deeply concerned that we are hastening the day when China will be number one. And that's why there's I'm deeply concerned that we are hastening the day when China will be number one. And that's why there's
And that's what we love to hear. All right, we love to hear these Edomites deeply concerned about their kingdom. All right, these Edomites are deeply concerned, all right, that they're hastening their own destruction. All right, which the prophets of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, starting with the elders, apostles on down, have been warning of and foretelling for years. That at the end of the day, Babylon would be the own catalyst to its destruction. Babylon would self-destruct. And right now we're in the midst of that self-destruction with this current presidency, all right, with the current legislation that is being set in place, all right, with prophecy taking place, with the Lord working on the minds of these kings, all right, to come together and separate from the whore. Babylon is self-imploding, just like Antiochus. And we love to hear it, man. We love to hear these devils
sitting back, effectively smiling at these big dinners and saying, yeah, you just go to it in the Middle East.
Well, and that, you saw an armada of about 171 oil tankers heading to the United States to buy up about 200 million barrels. Well, and that, you saw an armada of about 171 oil tankers heading to the United States to buy up about 200 million barrels.
Let's say bugs in the system, perverting the system. And the way that's working right now is we will not have energy, right? And that won't let us compete.
Let me give you my 2 cents on this, because I think you've teed up a very important issue. The first, a principle, and then how to apply it. When you have these shortages, the people who go without are the poorest people. Always.
Yeah.
The richer people and the middle class people, they'll pay more prices and they will give up luxury like steak, but they will not go without as much as the poorer people. Now, the people who have become the poorer in the last 30 years, the audience may not really know this, are exactly Trump's core base, which is the non-college educated white working class. That group has lost more ground since 1990. Not really know this, since 1990 than anybody else. It has lost more ground since 1990. Not really know this, since 1990 than anybody else.
The white working class, the non-educated white working class, has been losing ground since the 90s, and now they find themselves in the same state as a nigga. Welcome to Deuteronomy 30:7. You know, the Lord has turned the curses upon these devils. And now, in their hellish desire to conquer the earth through technology, you know, and to implement their mark of the beast, which is the RFID microchip, they're offering up their own people as collateral. You know, they're destroying their own commonwealth, you know, their people's own commonwealth. Hey, so Ecclesiastes 25 says one of the happiest things a man can behold, roughly paraphrasing, is the downfall of his enemy. You know, and this is a very joyous occasion, to see how Babylon is constantly failing. Constantly failing,
Anybody else.
constantly
So
making
other
terrible
groups can
decisions
complain, but
in
I'm
the
just
hopes
telling
that
you the
this new
curves,
system
the actual
will bring
reality
them back
curves.
on top.
So that group here is a group that, for example, could be truckers. They could be the people that are going to be using, and that what's happening is, I think it would make a great deal of sense. So President Trump is already, I'll just float an idea here, which I've never done before, but this vehicle might be able to get to the West Wing, which is there needs to be something akin to no tax on tips for this vehicle might be able to get to the West Wing, which is there needs to be something akin to no tax on tips for
And we gonna stop it there. There was another point in the video that I wanted to touch on too, but for interest of time, we're just gonna cut it right there. Lord wants us edifying unto you elect. The windows are darkening for Babylon, man. They're getting darker and darker. And opportunities to salvage this kingdom are failing. They're closing. As the scriptures say, if it were possible, we would have healed Babylon. All right, but there is no healing Babylon. All right, and in terminal illness has been struck upon Babylon, and there is no coming back from